So let's get to some of the offseason news that's been going on. Where do you want to go? Let's get back to coaching. There have been some interesting coaching hires, to say the least. My guy Cowherd, I know you've turned on Cowherd, and that's so unfortunate.
I don't dislike it as much as I used to. I appreciate his craft.
I'm happy. He talked about this being a great year of coaching candidates, but a bad year of coaching hires.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good call.
Because he even said, he was like, I think Urban's probably the best hire, and he's a college guy who's done absolutely nothing in the NFL ever.
He's the most fun hire for sure. He's definitely like the most interesting, like the one you're like, ooh, that's fun. But like again, we all know the history of college coaches coming into the NFL. It's not great.
I mean, you got you got Pete Carroll.
Sure, but for every Pete Carroll, you got Nick Saban.
Nick Saban got fucked over by his doctor not clearing Drew Brees, so they got Dante Culpepper instead.
That's an interesting take on it. Definitely fair enough. I mean, first off, let's look at last year's. Although, just like in terms of like how you can react in the moment and how it can be completely different. Like Joe Judge, such a random hire, no idea, not a sexy hire, but like I'd say relatively good hire. Would you agree?
I agree.
So
far, yeah, because he's brought a culture that they bought into. I wasn't I'm like special teams coordinator. I mean, he's coached under Saban, he's coached under Belichick, so he knows what winning looks like. He knows what right looks like, but he's not a offensive or defensive guy. But as I've gotten older and more wise, you don't necessarily need an offensive specialist or a defensive specialist as your head coach, because that's what you hire coordinators for.
Sure. I guess my point is like random hire, but seems to be the right hire, at least to this point. And then you go to someone like Matt Rule, who it's like he was the sexy hire last year. It was like, oh, he makes teams good better everywhere he went. He turned around Baylor. He turned around Temple. And like the Panthers sucked last year. I feel like they were like the team that every week you're like, oh, I think this Panthers team could win. And every week they're like, they're not very good. So
but they had no Christian McCaffrey.
Right. Although Mike Davis played pretty well. But they don't have a QB. They don't have a QB.
I'm just playing devil's advocate here.
Yeah.
But the Matt Rule thing, him turning around Baylor, turning around a Texas college football program is like turning around a fucking car. It's not right. If you are a coach with a pulse, especially what Baylor was coming off of, Art Briles was running a good program down there. They were just doing some not good stuff. So it's not like Baylor was awful.
Right.
Turn around because those boosters hadn't left. They're still writing those checks.
No, you're right. But hey, but we can get back to the current ones. We want to go down the list?
Yeah.
We got Robert Saleh, New York Jets. What do you think?
I don't know. I say I don't know because he's a motivator, rah-rah guy. He had a good defense that had good players.
Yeah.
But they play an outdated form of defense that just, if you don't have players that cover three Pete Carroll style of defense just doesn't really work. Like you don't have the personnel. You're not going to out scheme people is what I'm getting at.
So what you're saying is that the Jets should draft a pass rusher instead of a QB when they got their first round pick. I'm just saying because I feel like the Niners had so much defensive line talent. That was hard. It was not that it was hard not to be good, but like he definitely had all the pieces. You're right. He had so many. Like that team seems to find linebackers off the scrap heap every year. But they had a bunch of dudes who knew what they were doing on defense. You're right.
Yeah. So, what are your thoughts on Saleh?
Everything I saw pointed to Detroit, which was interesting. Can you hear me still?
Yeah. I'm
All
listening.
right, cool. I got a weird headphones noise. Everything pointed to Detroit because I think everyone was trying to point to um his background and everything. But I mean, I like I like head coaches that call either defensive signals or offensive plays because then when you get the brain drain, when you get successful and everyone wants to take all your coordinators from you, at least you don't lose your play caller on one side of the ball. So I do like it. But the whole thing comes down to like whether the Jets, after 2 years of going 6-10 or 7-9, will keep him. You can't just every 2 years fire a guy who's trying to get your program back in order. I mean, sometimes it happens that way, but sometimes you got to let him go. But I guess we'll see.
And just thinking though, just let's go a little what if. You're a Raider guy. You know they like the what ifs. What if they don't fire Todd Bowles? They let him play it out to now. Maybe he's not the guy. You replace him with Saleh, but obviously Tampa Bay doesn't win a Super Bowl. But also, man, you've shown the NFL community that there is some stability here. That hey, we just kept a coach for 5 years. I know he didn't do what maybe he didn't do what we wanted him to do, but we're just taking these 5 years to show the rest of the NFL. If you are an up and coming coordinator, or if you're an old head coach looking for a coordinator job, that you can come here and you don't have to worry about getting fired in 2 years.
Yeah, and then if you keep going that what if, obviously chain reaction, they probably wouldn't have been bad enough to get, or they might not have been bad enough or had the same pick to get Jamal Adams. But like if you have stability like that and you don't have someone like Adam Gase, who I think we can all agree shouldn't be a head coach, you don't let a player of that caliber, of Jamal Adams' caliber, go, even if you don't have him. It doesn't seem like a place if you have stability, you just let good players go, which has set a weird precedent with that team also, where it's like, don't come here if you want to play good football. So I think that changes the whole face of it, honestly.
Maybe Le'Veon Bell doesn't fall off of a cliff.
Or maybe he still does.
Let's see. What about the Lions? We're talking about Detroit. How do you feel about the Lions hire the knee biter?
I mean, that guy's got to be a rah-rah guy as opposed to X's and O's, right? I mean, when you click on his name on Google, he's still playing football. He also looks like he kicked my ass and yours at the same time. I don't want to speak for both of us, but
I own things that can protect me from such occurrences.
That's fair. But can they protect you from knee biting? Well, I guess hopefully we'll never have to find that out.
Yeah, I'm not into that whole fighting thing. I use this thing and I call 911.
I think obviously the press conference is weird, but like he doesn't get paid for giving. I mean, it's kind of, but like he's not going to be successful if he gives a good press conference or not. He's going to be a good football coach or not. I mean, it's one of those things where anybody but Matt Patricia seems like they'd be great at this point, right? It's also one of those things where like, who are their coordinators? Because it seems like with a motivational guy like someone who's not offensively or defensively inclined, that like their coordinators do then end up mattering a lot. But then they're going to be in a rebuilding phase anyway. They're going to have Jared Goff and whoever else the QB. So I'm not exactly sure what you could really go on right there in Detroit.
At least they gave him a 6-year contract that says, "Hey, we're committed to you, Dan Campbell."
Yeah, I guess so. I guess they can fire whoever. I did like my favorite hire there is they hired Eagles running back coach Deuce Staley, who I think was gypped out of a chance of being our offensive coordinator. So maybe they let him move up the line eventually, but hopefully I wish him the best. Hopefully that's somewhere he can thrive.
So you got Deuce and Anthony Lynn coaching together?
Where's Anthony Lynn? Is he Detroit now?
Yeah, he's OC Detroit.
Well, so it looks like they have a lot of. Oh, he is. Did he play ball? Was he in the NFL at some point?
Yeah.
So it looks like they have all players at positions because they got. I have to look at Aaron Glenn, their defensive coordinator, but they got Anthony Lynn at OC, played in the NFL. Deuce Staley, assistant head coach, running backs coach, played running back in the NFL. Quarterbacks coach, blast from the past, Mark Brunell, and then offensive line coach Hank Fraley, who was also an Eagles center at one point. So they're
Glenn
definitely
also played in the league.
What's up?
Aaron Glenn did play in the league.
He did.
Yeah.
And then they're expected to hire Antoine Randall L as the wide receiver coach.
Oh, I like
it. That's all of them, right? They got all NFL players coaching the team. So honestly, I think I just talked myself into the Lions. I like what they're doing. I like that they're giving former players chances to shine. So a bit of a tangent, but Fansided, I was producing an interview with Ed Reed last week, and he was very distraught. We're just upset, more disappointed in the fact that the NFL, it was difficult for certain players to gain respect as coaches. He said that getting his voice heard as a defensive backs coach, I think with Buffalo, he just didn't feel heard. So it's excellent. It's excellent to hear something like that.
How crazy does that sound? Ed Reed, Hall of Fame safety, one of the best players at his position, voice doesn't get heard in a coaching meeting.
Not to mention that although he looks wise as hell, guy has to be the smartest defensive back I've ever seen. Like one of those dudes who Manning and Brady were like, we got to watch out for this guy. Like, God damn.
Like, have you heard Belichick talk about him?
Yeah.
Like,
it's shocking. It was shocking to hear. It was. I was disappointed that he was disappointed. But
what about Brandon Staley out to the Chargers?
I mean, he has a good QB to start out with. I mean, he was the Rams defensive coordinator, right?
Yeah, for like one season.
Right, and he's another 38-year-old. Okay.
Yeah.
I will say I like that the fact that the NFL will go with some younger guys. The fact that they all look kind of the same, we've obviously been over that a little bit, but it's another thing. But I like the fact that, like, all right, this job. Have you ever heard NFL coordinators and coaches talk about how much they sleep at night? It's like 4 to 5 hours. These guys are looking at film like a disgusting amount of time. And so it makes sense that the younger guy would be maybe starting to get hired more for the job, right? Because like they're not as old, they could stay out maybe later. Am I ridiculous?
They're going to stay up and do it and not rest on their experience and what they know. Yeah,
exactly. They're driven. So, I mean, that's definitely good.
I think I like the hire from what I've heard about him. He's an innovative defensive mind. Like he's blending coverages and he's doing some next level stuff that not many people are doing. And not saying that he's the next Belichick, but you know how Belichick just has done things on defense that's like, what the hell is this?
Right.
I read that Brandon Staley is that type of coach.
Okay. I mean, and just from a personal standpoint, I mean, he beat Hodgkin's lymphoma, which I believe is cancer, right?
Yes.
He beat cancer at age 24. That's pretty impressive. And it seemed that like that Rams defense, I mean, obviously they had some stars. You had Jalen Ramsey, you had Aaron Donald, but like he had that defense humming. Like he had them playing really good. Everybody else too, like that other cornerback, the opposite of Jalen Ramsey was killing it, had his best year ever.
And he had Jalen playing a different way. So Dave Culley to the Texans. He's
Texans.
He's a sacrificial lamb. You know, he's been an NFL lifer. Good for you for finally getting your chance at your first NFL job. I want to root for his success, but I don't really want to root for the Texans to be successful, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But I just think he's one of those people who this was going to be his only chance to ever be a head coach in the league. So he's like, I'm just going to take this job just because there's only 32 of them.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that has going for him is he was on Andy Reid's staff at one point, and the Andy Reid coaching tree seems to be one of the more reliable coaching trees in the NFL. And he's been around the NFL forever. I mean, he was a running backs coach for Austin Peay back in like 1978. So he's definitely been around the block. Definitely a little different hire. It's just unfortunate that he has to go in that kind of situation.
Yeah, no one wanted that job though. Once Deshaun, said, "Hey, I want to leave." Anybody, any coach who is trying to coach long term. Any of the younger coaches are like, nah, I'm good off that job. They should have just brought in Jeff Fisher because he's great at moving teams.
Well, then you just got a middling draft pick. At least bring in somebody terrible. Bring Bill O'Brien back and get a top draft pick. Just don't let him trade it away. That doesn't make sense to me. Why do we keep letting coaches be GMs too? It never works. Even with Andy Reid in Philly, like, he's a great coach. We know that. We've seen it now over and over again. But don't make him GM. And
his mentor Mike Holmgren didn't do it.
Yeah, I mean, it just never worked. Again, Bill Belichick is always the exception to the rule. Any rule you have, Bill Belichick is the exception. So just like, coaching is hard enough. Don't make him the GM too. It never works. So Texans should hopefully learn that for the future.
Yeah, so now let's get to the two coaching hires that are personal to the both of us.
There you go. You can go first.
I'll go first. Okay. Arthur Smith to the Falcons. I've talked about it previously on this pod in depth. At first, I was unimpressed. I was like, hell no. He's only been a coordinator for 2 years. And Adam Gase, and I said this before we hired him, I said Adam Gase is going to get Arthur Smith a job that he doesn't deserve. And it was the stench of Adam Gase all over Ryan Tannehill. Once he got a competent coach around him who could put together a game plan that actually worked, we'd see that Ryan Tannehill is a decent quarterback, a top quarterback in the league if we're judging him based off who he's been in Tennessee, off the numbers, right? But you know that given the scheme that they have, given that they have Derrick Henry, he's better because of what's around him. So my fear with Arthur Smith is that he is a product of Derrick Henry, and Derrick Henry is not a product of him. And don't get me wrong, Derrick Henry is a good running back, great running back. He's had his 2 best seasons under Arthur Smith. So I'm hoping that Arthur can bring that same grit to the Falcons. And from what I've seen, from what he's said, from his interviews, it looks like he's bringing accountability and a tough mindset to a team that's lacked accountability, that has a culture that needed to be revamped because the Falcons could not score touchdowns, could not score any in the red zone, could not hold leads. And Arthur Smith has one of the best red zone offenses in the NFL the past 2 seasons.
Okay, that's definitely the bright side of it. I'm going to be a little more negative. I apologize. I got to call it how I see it. One, I think it's hilarious. Like I've been saying, it's another white 38-year-old. It's the trend. They did it again. I think it's ridiculous. I will say that this might mean you're going to try to get some kind of bell cow running back. At least if he tries to emulate what Derrick Henry did, you're going to need a lead back like you had in Tennessee. So I think I don't know if Gurley has the legs in him to be an all down back anymore. No. I will say this guy, and I've listened to Chris Long talk about this, about how a lot of coordinators are fake it till you make it type dudes, or they're just going to bullshit their way to the top. And if you look at his resume, he was a defensive quality control coach, and then he was an offensive quality control coach, and then he was an assistant offensive line coach and an assistant tight ends coach, and then he's an offensive coordinator. So I just like, is he defense? Is he offense? Is he receivers? Is he offensive line? This guy seems like he's faking it until he makes it happen. I mean, and he could be smart, but it just seems like a guy who's just kind of taking whatever they give him. I don't know if he's good at any of this stuff.
He's definitely a line guy. And again, I hope he can help bolster our offensive line because we've been terrible in the trenches. But what are your thoughts on the best head coaching press conference of all of them? Dan Campbell, head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles, Nick Sirianni.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to get paid. Obviously, part of his job is a press conference. But I mean, as long as he puts together a good offensive game plan, I could give a damn about how many times he repeats himself or stutters in front of the Philadelphia media. Hey, we put the pressure on. All right, he cracked under the pressure. He's nervous. He's a young kid. All right, he's only 25. No, I'm joking. Another 39. It wasn't 38. He's 39. I mean, basically, Jeffrey Luria, the Eagles owner. just wanted someone as close to Frank Reich as possible, because I think it became clear once Frank Reich left that he took something with him. And Doug Peterson his staff was just never as good after Reich left. So Larry just thinks, all right, let's get some guy who coached under Reich, and we'll see if we can create the magic all over again. He could be good, but I don't think the reason for hiring him was great, to be completely honest. I don't think he called plays for 2 years, which doesn't mean a lot, because you could, I don't think Doug Peterson called too many plays, and then he came in and won a Super Bowl. So weirder stuff has happened, but I think the reason for hiring him was bad.
Fair. I don't think the job should have been available. But we'll hit that when we hit our division wrap-ups.